With a sprawling roster of characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, every new introduction comes with us asking, why? With a whole load of previously introduced heroes and villains, a character's inaugural scene needs to wow us and set the bar for what to expect from them in the future. What makes for a good character introduction? Well, you've come to the right place to find out. Kicking things off, and we have potentially the most important character introduction in the MCU.
Who the hell are you? Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D.
When Samuel L. Jackson stepped out of the shadows in the post-credit scene from Iron Man, the MCU truly began. For starters, the casting was brilliant, as the Ultimate line of comics used Jackson as inspiration for the character's reinterpretation. And then there is the concept of post-credit scenes, which would go on to become a recurring tradition in nearly every Marvel movie that followed, introducing mini villains and plot points going forward. Oh yeah, he also brought up some little team he was assembling called the, oh gosh, what was it? The Revengers or Avengers or something? They seem to be important in this universe, not gonna lie. The fate of the Marvel films really sat on Robert Downey Jr.'s shoulders during the runtime of the first Iron Man movie. So, no pressure at all there. It's only a franchise with a multi-billion-dollar potential. Whatever. Our first look into the life of Tony Stark was with Warts and All. Showcasing Tony at his most selfish, Robert really sells the side of Tony that he would come to resent. This scene sets the base for the character development that would follow through in his 10 other appearances, and in under 5 minutes, we understand the industrious CEO's biggest flaws. It's just good storytelling, people. Although that MySpace reference, man, that thing was dated by the film's release. There's a number of iconic musical moments in film. The opening turf war between the Jets and the Sharks in West Side Story, Gene Kelly singing in the rain, and Star-Lord belting out some Redbone into a makeshift Orloni microphone on Morag. Even for a comic book movie, the concept of the Guardians of the Galaxy sounded bonkers, and our first look at adult Star-Lord lets the audience know there's a whole lot more of that absurdity coming right at you. There were a number of reports coming out during the Andrew Garfield days of Spider-Man that made it seem like he was going to cross over with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's why it was such an exciting moment when the title card Queens finally popped up in Captain America: Civil War. The following scene was just a perfect Peter Parker exposition. It covers how adorkable Peter is, showcases some of his early Spider-Man shenanigans, and brings a semblance of the Great Power Speech. In only 5 minutes, Civil War covered the origin story of Peter that took the entire runtime of his other films to cover. Not every character introduction needs to be action-packed, or for a character that's going to change the entire film universe as we know it, and Luis's introduction in Ant-Man is the perfect example of that.
Hey, how's your girl, man?
She left me.
Oh.
Yeah, my mom died too.
When we first meet Luis, he is driving Scott Lang home from prison, and in a record-breaking 13 seconds, we fall in love with him. In the scene, we get a small glimpse at Luis's superpower, the ability to gleefully and hilariously summarize long spans of events in a short few seconds, which would go on to become not only one of the best running gags in the Ant-Man movies, but also the Infinity Saga as a whole. What was to be Ultron's perfect form, the synthezoid android Vision's intro sets several important plot points in motion. For starters, his birth comes with a whole lot of infighting between the Avengers, a tension that will fully come to fruition in the following Captain America: Civil War. Once he finally speaks, to separate himself from mad scientist creations of film past like Frankenfurter's Rocky Horror, he lets out some jargon that would have earned him at least a B- in high school philosophy before seamlessly picking up Mjolnir, and in that split second, the Avengers and the audience alike see how powerful the character truly is.
I'm sorry, that was odd.
The next MCU character to wield Mjolnir was Hela in Thor Ragnarok. And by wield, I guess I mean hold for a second before embarrassing her half-brother by crumbling it in her hands. This one is right to the point and encapsulates how powerful of an enemy the goddess of death is before the god of mischief chickens out and calls upon the Bifrost to save him and Thor before meeting an end, not unlike that oversized hammer. The internet seemed to universally hate John Walker when he first set foot in the MCU, parading around as the new Captain America. In only a few seconds, with only a wink and a wave, audiences knew he wasn't the right Cap replacement. We didn't even need to see his derriere to know it wasn't America's ass.
That is America's ass.
Speaking of internet outcries, we would be remiss not to mention Evan Peters' first appearance at the very end of On a Very Special Episode of WandaVision. With only a popsicle joke to his name, fans were theorizing faster than Quicksilver could run about how Evan's introduction into the MCU ties in with mutants and sets up future multiverse projects. Of course, none of that really panned out by the end of the season, but hey, those theories were fun while they lasted. While T'Challa's original introduction at the UN is absolutely heart-wrenching, it's his first appearance as Black Panther that quickly laid the groundwork for how powerful the Wakandan prince truly is, being able to hold his own against a super soldier murder machine. This fight between the Black Panther and the Winter Soldier quickly established how ferocious the Catman could be and immediately garnered interest in his spin-off film. So how does Marvel Studios realistically interpret a living planet? In the comics, it's literally it's a planet with a face on it, and depending on how funky the artist rendering, even includes a beard. Our first look at young Ego is a phenomenal CGI achievement, and no, it's not because they pulled off the Unicron-looking planet better than Michael Bay, but rather because they de-aged Kurt Russell to jaw-dropping results. Our first look at circa 1980 Ego is pretty uncanny to how the star looked in that time period, and set the gold standard for de-aging tech that would appear in many other MCU productions. Similar to Luis, Korg's introduction in Thor Ragnarok laid the foundation for a great comedic sidekick. While we first see the hulking Cronin exterior, expecting a hardened warrior, we quickly hear director Taika Waititi's Kiwi accent and can't help but immediately laugh at the subversion along with a phenomenally timed rock, paper, scissors joke.
Made of rocks, as you can see, but don't let that intimidate you. You don't need to be afraid unless you're made of scissors.
Who doesn't love a good heist scene? Eric Killmonger's adult introduction in the museum certainly delivers. Killmonger's goal in the movie is to take back what's rightfully his, specifically the throne of Wakanda, after his father, Prince N'Jobu, was killed by T'Chaka. The museum heist subtly introduced this idea by having him steal back the vibranium weaponry after being stolen by colonizers years ago. Killmonger was a serious fan favorite, and most of it was in part due to this fantastic scene. While Stan Lee may have cameoed in most of the films that spawned from his IP prior to the MCU, it was his little itty-bitty cameo in Iron Man 1 as Hugh Hefner that solidified the idea that we were to expect many more cameos in the future, and we sure are thankful that it started the trend in the MCU, as his cameos are some of the best parts of the franchise. Bucky's introduction in Captain America: The First Avenger may not have been all that noteworthy, but his introduction as the Winter Soldier in the sequel certainly left a mark. The assassination attempt on Nick Fury alone is just a great scene, and then when you think it's all over, through the blurry, bullet-riddled window, we start to make out the Winter Soldier himself. From that moment, we knew he wasn't the Boy Scout he used to be. Now, if we're going to flip the script a bit and go with the worst introduction, that might have to go to Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, who seemingly came out of nowhere and set up some team, maybe a dark team of some sorts. I'm sure we'll see more of her in the future, but for the time being, it was just a confusing inclusion.